Hey everybody, TacticAngel back on the PlayStation 5 to take a look at another premium ship in World of Warships Legends. This time we'll be taking a look at the Ægir, the Tier 8 premium German cruiser. For this review, I'm going to ramble for a bit before talking about the ship in game. Then we'll talk about commanders, run down the stats, and finish off with some gameplay. As always, if you do want to skip around at all, you should see some time codes in the description to help you out. If we look at the description in game, the Ægir is an O-class cruiser. This is a reference to what is commonly referred to as an O-class Schlachtkreuzer, or battle cruiser, but it's important to recognize that Schlachtkreuzer is not a true German designation. The O-class was, in fact, a battleship by contemporary German designation, but since it is designed to have different roles than most battleships, English writers labeled it a battle cruiser, and it kind of got backfilled into German. If you want a full description of what the O-class was intended to be, I would watch the first few minutes of my Siegfried review, which I've linked in the description. That said, this is not exactly a copy-paste job, but instead the Ægir is intended to represent a revision of that design with 12-inch guns. Though contemplated for a follow-up to the Deutschland-class Panzerschiffe, which we have in game as Graf Spee, the 12-inch gun was never developed in Germany, which was one reason that the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau didn't end up looking more like the Odin in-game. Also, the O-class design did not receive considerable attention after the breakout of World War II, which makes the 1945 year of designation here probably more of a nod to the presence, again, of the 55mm L77 Garat 58 Zwilling rather than the design of the hull itself. So the Ægir is really much closer to a fantasy developed by the marketing department to sell you yet another Scharnhorst at a different tier. Makes sense, Scharnhorst is, if nothing else, a fun ship to play that tons of people really love. That said, Ægir being a fantasy ship makes a certain amount of sense. In Norse mythology, Ægir is probably a Jotun, which we typically call a giant in English, or possibly a Norse god. In either case, he more or less functioned as the god of the sea, similar to Poseidon, who had to be appeased or he'd send you to a watery death, personified by his wife, Ran. Ægir is more typically spelled like this, or with a simple AE at the beginning in English. The spelling we have in-game is traditional for German, and there's some basis for a ship named Ægir, as we can see here, with the Odin-class coastal defense ship built in 1896. Not that that had too much to do with history, let's just move on. As far as Ægir in-game, the ship is very easily compared to its sister ship, the Siegfried, which appeared some time ago in Legends as a Tier 7 cruiser that not everybody quite liked. The Ægir does have several similarities, but she also has some key differences, so let's break those down. Working in the Ægir's favor, she has 9 12-inch guns that actually have some semblance of accuracy, which will make for some more even performance versus ships like Siegfried. Just like her sister ship, Ægir is also pretty tough for a cruiser, with a decent HP pool and, more importantly, a solid main and upper armor belt. Other than that, Ægir has all of the things that people tend to like about German ships: high AP damage, consistent low damage HE penetration, torpedoes, improved sonar, and in this case even a little bit extra in the secondary battery, which can reach out beyond your typical 5 kilometers. The reason people may not love the Ægir is more or less the same reason that people didn't really care much for Siegfried. Though marginally better armored, her place at Tier 8 isn't considerably better than the Siegfried's place at Tier 7. There are a lot of battleship targets that you aren't going to be able to bow tank, and even when playing at range, it's more of a question of being able to try to manage the angle of shells hitting your ship rather than hoping to actually dodge incoming fire. Past that, no matter how good your German sonar tends to be, it's not a replacement for radar, which will leave you, at times, feeling at a bit of a disadvantage in the vision game. The lack of a catapult also puts this battlecruiser at a bit of a disadvantage, and as novel as having a secondary battery booster is, it's not often all that useful. So folks who are going to enjoy the Ægir are folks who probably like 2 of our previous campaign ships, those being Carnot and Kronstadt. Ægir is considerably different, not having the same blazing speed as Carnot, and not being quite as tough, when properly angled even as Kronstadt. This time she has the trappings of a German ship though. Similar to those other battlecruisers though, you won't enjoy it if you go in too hard and expect this thing to face tank, And also those of you who don't like these undersized battleships masquerading as cruisers, then Aegir might be more of the same. but she may be the most competitive of the three that we have so far. As far as commander choices, the Aegir seems to function best if you maintain a comfortable distance between your firing range and sea detectability. This will allow you to function as a flanker and opportunist when you're able, and to provide fire support at ranges where her bow and stern are less exploitable. For better or worse, that means Gunther Lutjens may be a more difficult commander to get to work in this, though not impossible. His abilities will get you the most maneuverable version of this ship with faster turrets. If you're dead set on using a reload mod in slot 4, he might be closer to a must-have. Being limited to the base range of Ægir may not feel as bad as with other ships, so again, not unworkable, but you will have limited other advantages for offense other than the recently added loyalty to the Navy perk, which seems to be a bit of an upside-down skill, but whatever, it's still helpful with accuracy. With Karl von Müller, the goal of ending up with a good standoff distance is obtained mostly, if not entirely, through beyond range. Otherwise, Karl offers mostly bonuses to offense, most notably improved AP damage, which is very nice on Ægir. Nevertheless, you could trade that out for some more damage reduction. Slot 2 is a bit of a bummer, but just because this thing isn't a great fire starter worth your main battery, Burn It Down also helps your secondary battery fire starting chance too. I will say one more thing though, Alarm Bell may make this ship more maneuverable, but it will never make this ship truly agile. So I probably wouldn't go out there trying to take as much damage as needed to actually activate this, just in hopes of making this ship wiggle right. Though it may seem like a strange option, Reinhardt's Share actually provides some acceptable advantages for Ægir, and you'll achieve your goals here by actually further limiting your sea detectability with Look at Me Now, then building around whatever else you think is important. Speed is always nice, and you have extra maneuverability or extra range in slot 4. It's far from an exotic build, and admittedly slot 1 here is a bit of a dud, but the ship felt very manageable under Share in my opinion. Next we're going to jump to stats, and as always the things that you're going to see on screen are the ship as she comes stock, with the exception of concealment, which includes the camo that comes with the ship. Looking at the survivability of Ægir, she starts off strong with 62,850 hit points. That's a healthy 15,000 more than average, though if you compare her to other battle cruisers, she ranks behind both Carnot and Kronstadt in terms of overall HP. Armor values rank from between 16 and 360 millimeters, which is a good number, and the 37% torpedo reduction is best in class, and even decent for a battleship. As we look a little bit deeper with her protection, you can see both some additional strengths and some additional weaknesses. The big orange section in the middle of the ship is your belt, which is more than capable of bouncing any shell in the game when correctly angled. Above that, your 30mm deck isn't exactly great, but it will also generally skip battleship shells from medium ranges. It will also probably bounce those shells into your poorly armored superstructure, which you have kind of a lot of, but that's probably not surprising for anyone who's ever played a German ship before. The major downside to Ægir's survivability is going to be your bow and stern. With just 27mm, this is going to be overpenetrated by pretty much anything that's 16 inches or larger, and that is a much larger proportion of the ships that you're going to face at Tier 8 than at Tier 7. You will be able to bounce 15-inch battleships though, so just pay attention to what you're doing. Ægir's main battery consists of a 3x3 arrangement of 12-inch guns. That's a main battery that matches the Carnot and Kronstadt in terms of caliber, and it is the largest that you'll find in any of the cruisers at the tier right now. With 16.2 kilometer range, she also has the joint longest main battery range. The 20-second reload is not incredible. You might think it compares unfavorably against a ship like Kronstadt with its 18.5-second reload, but it does feel like maybe your men are taking at least a second and a half to aim, unlike that ship, because Ægir does seem to put a lot more shells on target. If at all possible, sticking to AP in Ægir is probably a good idea, both because of the 9,100 damage, that is very good. It's the single best shell damage of any cruiser at the tier right now, but it's also because your 3,600 HE damage plus your long reload makes you the lowest damage per minute at the tier if you choose to go that route. The HE can be relied upon to penetrate anything other than the thickest of armor, even on battleships, and is decent enough at starting fires, but that's kind of it. AP will struggle to pen against well-armored battleships, but like Odin and Scharnhorst before it, you can make good damage simply by aiming at the upper belt rather than over-optimistic waterline shots. It's worth noting here that the Ægir does come with a 6.5 kilometer secondary battery range. That range can lead you to believe that this should be a brawling ship. Probably not. Ægir has a total of 9 turrets, each mounting a pair of 5-inch guns. Offensively, you can really get about 4 of them onto a target, at best. Then there's an extra one sitting at the back of your ship, so maybe 5 while moving away from your target. What are you doing? This is a German battleship? The overall DPM and fire potential of this secondary array is just a bit below average, and both of these values work out to be about half of what you'd expect from Carnot, and though you do have better range, I wouldn't recommend building for secondaries. Unlike the other 2 battlecruisers we have in game, Ægir does come with torpedoes, 1 quad launcher on each side of the ship. These are basically the same torpedoes that we find on every other German cruiser and battleship. They are a 6-kilometer range, 13,700 damage, and a moderate 65 knot speed. Detectability is generally not an issue with these, since anyone who knows anything about German ships will expect them at a certain point, usually around exactly the same time they realize that they've gotten a little closer than they'd like to be. In any case, the torpedoes on Ægir are most likely to help you make sure you either win a brawl or at least increase the chances that there are multiple losers in any such close quarters engagement, but for the long-term survivability of your ship, you may want to be farther away. Jumping to AA, Ægir's protection is pretty good. You've got a total of 332 damage per second, almost 30% more than average, and it's all pretty much out there at 5 or 6 kilometers. Then you got an extra 60 up close. This earns you a very good 93 rating. There are probably better things to do with Ægir than turn this into an AA boat, but it would provide decent coverage if you really wanted to do that. My guess is most carriers will still prefer not to strike you, but this defense is not going to be quite enough to shield you against their attention. Ægir's maneuverability is not great for a cruiser. At 33.5 knots, she's pretty average, but because you are kind of a big boat, your 880 meter turning circle is kind of wide, 10 to 40 meters wider than other battle cruisers, and with a 14-second rudder shift, this is again pretty bad for a cruiser, but it's faster than Carnot or Kronstadt. In that case, if you do have Siegfried, surprise, surprise, these are exactly the same values, so this won't feel too different than that ship. And aside from higher speed, she won't feel all that much different than either Odin or Scharnhorst. Unsurprisingly, the Ægir's concealment is not great for a cruiser. It's about 700 meters worse on average from sea, 400 from air, and the 10.6 is among the worst firing penalties for cruisers at the tier. Perhaps not unsurprising, Ægir also shares these values with Carnot, and there are certainly more visible cruisers out there. They're the Soviet ships. Obviously, though, these values are quite a bit better than any battleship out there. When we look at consumables, you're not going to get a lot of options. Starting out, we have the standard cruiser damage control party. Your only option here is in your next slot, which is either sonar or DFAA. My argument for sonar would be that it is good sonar, German sonar, blessed with a 5.7 kilometer range for detecting ships and 3.9 for torpedoes. Though far from radar in terms of range, when pushing a smokescreen, it pairs pretty well with your long-range secondaries, even if they aren't typically all that helpful. DFAA is exactly what you would expect, temporarily doubling your AA damage. Ægir does have good AA, so maybe this is attractive to you, but it also strikes me as kind of an odd choice since you're at a tier where you would have to fail division with a carrier. You also have heals, like most higher level cruisers, and then the oddity, enhanced secondary targeting. By all means, press this if you see your boys going to town, but there's not enough secondaries on this ship to make it a really good choice to build into, and I definitely tried. Hats off to MetaJerk for putting up with me playing like an idiot on patch day. I did it for science. Alright, and now we're going to jump into some gameplay. We're going to be on Tears of the Desert. We're starting out on the left side of the map, sometimes referred to as the west side. I am in a division with Mark, aka White. We are just tooling around for no particular reason, I don't think. No, I know why we're here. We're here because he wanted to play the new Russian destroyer. In any case, I will go ahead and put my commander up on the screen. Here what we have is more or less one of the two builds that I landed on as being kind of one of my favorite things to do in this ship. In this case, we've got Karl von Müller. We're going for range. We're going to try to keep the distance between where I can be seen and where I can shoot as long as possible, because the guns on this ship more or less just work. There are a lot of other advantages to it, but if you want to play this ship well, I think those are more or less secondary things to think about. And you don't want to really be drawn too much into close combat, because you will take a lot of damage in this ship pretty quickly. It does have some pretty outstanding stuff when you get there, but I guess, put it this way, you usually only get to do that once a game. Now here we've been watching this rune for quite some time. I'm more or less expecting him to move towards the middle, give me more broadside, give me something like that to shoot at. We start out the game pretty okay with 15,000 damage, including one citadel, and now we're seeing what's out here. We've drawn the attention of a Bismarck, pretty well armored ship. It is a full-on battleship, and it looks like he's got a brother, the Bismarck B. Now, those are both ships that I probably want to keep some amount of distance from, just because they both are probably playing secondary builds. So I'm going to stay at 15 kilometers. I start shooting. Mark's intention here is actually to see if he can get into some smoke and farm some damage. So I need to shoot in order to make sure that somebody can see me so that they can continue to shoot at me, or start shooting at me in any case. And Aegir does have the toughness to take some shots, so this isn't actually a bad idea, even if this is a little off topic, how to play in a division type play. Now we've switched over to HE. We're far enough away that we're probably not going to do a lot of damage with AP, and against a well-armored target, you know, that's doubly true. It also wouldn't be the worst thing in the world with torpedoes inbound for that guy to take a flood, because then that's a lot of damage for other people on my team, and I do know that Mark is trying to torpedo him here. It doesn't work out. It's fine. Whatever. I'm just going to keep shooting, and as you can see, we are pretty well angled against Bismarck. Bismarck does have 15-inch guns, so he's not the most dangerous thing in the world to me. My bow will probably bounce him. And as we're getting right up on top of this, we're trying to figure if we have left ourselves enough room to dodge this island. Like it just jumped out in front of me or something. But slowing down and turning out, it does look like we have done okay. Now I gotta start paying a good amount of attention to the minimap here. The Ægir is really, really, really dangerous at close range. I will say that if this guy takes an inside route towards me, I have a lot of ability to really hurt him. Bismarck is a lot of things. Its secondaries are going to chew me up pretty badly. I'm not that well armored against his HE secondaries, but I have a lot of confidence that I'd be able to make it not worth his while. And it looks like he's not interested. He's already turned out. So as we're coming around the side of this corner, we'll just open up again with our main battery. And now we're switching over to AP. Now AP, you see me aim up just a little bit here, and that's to get my shells into his upper belt. 18,000 damage is probably unrealistically high in most salvos, but 10 and 12,000 isn't all that crazy. You can be the judge. Bismarck's got a pretty good belt and a turtleback, so I don't think I'm going to be able to get through him that way, but that ship isn't that well protected against this kind of damage. As he's turning out, I expect that this is going to sort of peter out in terms of effectiveness. Now you will see me make a nose in here. The nose in is because I can see that we've got some more 15-inch battleships shooting at me. So I'm thinking I do want to continue to shoot, but I also kind of want to lose my spot here pretty soon. That extra damage against Amalfi is probably going to convince him that he should burn his damage con. And there we go. We lose our spot. We're going to try to make our pro gamer turn here while we're not spotted. That difference between your main battery firing range and your sea detectability is one reason why you're able to do things like this if you do decide to play the ship kind of like this. We get halfway around on Flandre. If he shoots at me now, I'm still not quite well angled enough, so we feather our throttle here a little bit to change the shape of our turn. Charles Martel is coming up. He looks like a pretty healthy boy. Rear turret of Justice. With just 3 shells, we finish him off. And obviously we've got some accuracy going on in terms of our build here, so this is made a little bit easier by that, but there's not an insignificant element of luck there. But there are 2 things that Ægir has really kind of going for it here that maybe Siegfried doesn't. Siegfried with only 6 guns. If you get unlucky, the dispersion looks a lot worse. I'm also fairly convinced that the overall accuracy of these shells, or these turrets, is a little bit better than the Tier 7 counterpart. So what you end up with is a ship that has considerably less in terms of each shell's damage, but you have more shells, and it feels like you're more likely to actually land them. Basically, 6 shells, maybe you get a big hit, maybe you miss everything. 9 shells, more likely to do okay every time. Now again, we're exploiting that distance between our main battery firing range and our sea detectability. And that's going to help us get around the outside of this island. Now when we see the Amalfi again, it's just too much of a target for me not to shoot at it. We're feeling lucky after that Charles Martel, and it would be nice to get it out of the game. So when I say it's consistent, it's more consistent. It might not be consistently consistent. We're going to use our last heal here. Come away with not a whole lot of anything on that last hit against Amalfi. He's angling in, which isn't really good. There are certainly some plenty embarrassing shots I've taken in this, and against a well-angled target, the Aegir is going to have a little bit more difficulty actually penning. Looks like Amalfi's slowing down, so we'll give it one more shot. We see the smoke appear, and he seems to have disappeared forever. Now we're going to go ahead and engage this battleship. He seems to have a lot of things going on for him already. The New Jersey is going to be able to punch through the front of my armor. You will see me maintain an angle that's something like this, just in case. The entire time that I try to engage it. At this sort of range, I feel okay about it, because if he does target me, I have a bounce chance on the side of my ship, and I might be able to do something about my bow. It's far enough away that he wouldn't be able to intentionally target me too effectively. But he is out of the game, and we are again shooting at longer range on the Bismarck. There was apparently no shortage of Bismarcks in the matchmaking when this game started, and eventually the game ends. We walk away with victory there, 178,000 damage, not too terribly bad. So, closing thoughts on Ægir. I actually like this ship quite a bit. She has her limitations that I think fall around that inherent urge to meet force with force when armed with anything that looks like a German battleship with secondaries and torpedoes. And by and large, I had to relearn how to play Siegfried. That battleship disguised as a cruiser still does make its hay on the edges, and that's going to be the same with Ægir. Siegfried is a powerful flanker that can drop huge damage on unsuspecting targets with the right RNG. With Ægir, you're probably going to be able to do the same, but more emphasis on consistent damage since you have more guns with more predictable hits. There's also a reasonable question about how hard they had to limit the Siegfried in order to fit it down a tier at tier 7 when both of these ships are at the same tier on PC. In any case, both of these can push a flank, they can contest in a pinch, and you'll probably want to think of that more as a mid or late game strategy to secure the win after hopefully winning your side. Getting hits with your secondaries is nice, but it should be secondary like the name implies, and you'll always be a threat with those torpedoes. You don't actually need to sail in order to hit people with them to prove that. Worst case scenario, if you need to kite, you're survivable enough to be annoying for long periods of time at decent range. Hopefully give your team time to make things happen, or at least force your enemy to win the game. All in all, other than the lack of vision, and I do mean radar, there's not that much to really complain about in Ægir. In any case, those are my thoughts on the ship. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, or if I've messed something up again. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.